This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 50. Craig Ballantyne. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 50 of Experts on the Wire. No, we're not doing a special 50th episode celebration. Maybe when we get to 100 we'll do that. But I will say, heading into the new year, 2017, I am very excited for what's to come with this show, Experts on the Wire. I have a great lineup of guests planned through the beginning of the new year. Today's show is a little bit of an interesting one. We do talk a lot about marketing, about SEO, but my guest is also an expert when it comes to kind of improving your daily life, your habits. And I think this episode is timed perfectly with the new year coming up. A lot of people, such as myself, are making New Year's resolutions. So at the end, we talk a bit about how to beat procrastination, something that really helps me, and how to kind of adjust your daily habits in a way that you can be successful at your marketing and at your SEO. But we also talk about Craig's content formula. He's an expert, a real expert at creating how-to content, and he has a great formula for doing that. We also talk about how he's got some really great backlinks from sites such as the 4-Hour Workweek, National Geographic, Business.com, Huffington Post, Bloomberg, the list goes on and on. In fact, he has one piece of content that has over 25 high-quality, organically received links. Now, these were not links that he performed outreach to get, but they are organic and they are very high quality. We go through a bunch of these one by one, and he talks about how he got each one of those. He also has a great formula for developing your customer persona. It's one of the most detailed customer personas I've ever heard. So, action-packed episode. I go out a little bit on a limb and take a chance because Craig and I had never talked or met prior to this interview, and I gave him some content and topic advice for his site. So tune in to see how that goes. Now, if you want to go to evolvingseo.com/wire, you can sign up on the email list and you will get an email after most episodes are posted. I find that once in a while I do skip an episode and give you a break on your inbox as well, but you get all the links, show notes, resources, and everything right in your inbox, and you can reply to me. If you have replied to me and not gotten a reply, let me know, because I have written back to everyone and I'm skeptical that my replies have been getting through. But enough of all the chit chat. Let's get right to episode 50 of Experts in the Wire with my guest, Craig Ballantyne. Hey everyone, I am very excited to have Craig Ballantyne on the line with us today. Craig, how are you?
Hey, really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us on Experts on the Wire. We were introduced by John Butt. I was on his podcast for marketing. I think, what is his podcast called? marketingforowners.com.
Yeah.
And
he has amazing show notes.
Yeah, I know. Doesn't he? I was so impressed. Better than my show notes, admittedly. And
I think he might have the best out of all the podcasts I've ever seen.
Yeah, what he does for the listeners is he actually writes out in paragraph form a summary of the conversation. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so thorough. It's really nice. But he said you would make a fantastic guest, not only because you're really great at productivity, and we're going to talk about designing your perfect day, but also you've had some great success with marketing your various things that you're involved with. So can you first give the listeners some background to yourself and the various kind of websites and companies that you run?
Right. Yeah, certainly. So I go all the way back online to 1999. I started an email newsletter in the fitness world back then. I had no idea what I was doing for like the first couple of years, but I got hooked up with Men's Health magazine, been writing for them since 2000. And that got me my credibility, which allowed me to start selling a program called Turbulence Training, which has been sold to, over 100,000 people around the world. And then we came up with another program and started selling it through Facebook advertising in 2012 and 2013, which really took off. It was called Home Workout Revolution and was very short bodyweight workouts. And we had success there until Facebook, basically they kick off everybody in the fitness market eventually. So we left there, but I grew that fitness business, and I still run it today, but it's a little bit smaller part of our business. Earlytorise.com is my main business today, and we sell the Perfect Day Formula book, which we're going to talk about, and some productivity, time management, and wealth building tools and courses on that site. So we basically, kind of circulate in the health, wellness, productivity, and success world.
Yeah, and it's a great story. And I want to jump back a little bit to when you first got featured on Men's Health. How did that happen, first of all? And then second of all, what things did you do to maintain that relationship so it was valuable for them?
That's a really great question, the second part there. The first part is I found the editor's email address online and I emailed him something. So I am the worst guy to ask about breaking into magazines because that's all I did. I sent him something at the right time, and I got into the magazine with the tip that I sent him. Just happened to work out. And then what I did is I quickly understood that magazine editors are overworked and underpaid, and they're always on deadline. And so whenever they get back to you, you have to reply to them as soon as you can. And so by doing that, I set myself apart from all the other experts who were too busy to get back to them. And so they kept on coming back to me for more and more advice. And so I built up a strong relationship with them. And, it's going on 16 years now that I've been doing something with them, plus Men's Fitness, plus Details when it was around, plus Women's Health, plus Oxygen Magazine, Prevention Magazine. I could go on and on and on. And it all started from that credibility that I gained from starting with Men's Health. So the marketing lesson there is to leverage the heck out of any publicity, any media that you have, because it can go a long way. Traditional media can still make you rich and famous, in addition to all the Instagrams and all that stuff out there.
I'm always curious about this, what was the initial spark of inspiration that even caused you to want to reach out to him via email?
Well, that's a great question too. And so I was writing this email newsletter, and, it's 1999, 2000. I started my email newsletter running it through Hotmail, believe it or not. I had 3,000 people on this email newsletter at one time before I got a real website. And I was sending out 60 emails through Hotmail to deliver the newsletter because you could only send it out to 50 people at a time. That's how stupid I was. And that's, back in 1999, 2000, I had no idea what I was doing. But I was actually also in graduate school in 2000, and I was looking for a job in the strength and conditioning world. I actually wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach in the NHL, of all things, was my college goal. And so I found on this job board, Men's Health editors looking for contributors. And it was like buried, it was like I had to, really look to see all the opportunities. And there it was, found them. All I did was send him a newsletter. I didn't even customize a pitch for him. And it just happened to really coincide with his mindset at the time about how he was shifting his ideas about training and what he was putting in the magazine. And he liked it. And the rest is history. So, again, I am the worst person to ask about how to get started in magazines, except for, always take advantage of any opportunity that you can. Make sure you follow up and make sure that you understand what the other side is going through. As I mentioned, they're busy, they're overworked, or they're paid peanuts. And when I could get back to them, it made their life easier. And so that allowed me to flourish.
Makes sense. And you might not know by looking at me now, but hockey was the sport that I played growing up here in the Northeast U.S. And
right. Well, I saw where you're from, so I figure you're a Bruins fan or something, right?
Yeah, I grew up on the Bruins, definitely. Skated with them when I was a kid, when I used to play hockey.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, Ray Bork and Cam Neely and all those names people probably you and I know, but nobody else listening knows. Right. But
well, everybody should know Cam Neely from Dumb and Dumber. He was Seabass.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's funny. I got to go and look at that now with that reference. Right. But so one last thing, getting back to the Men's Health, then we'll move on to kind of talking about email marketing and so forth. Anything in terms of the content that you did to provide them value, or were you trying to find unique topics they hadn't covered or cover them in a different way, or what sort of value were you adding with the content?
Again, it really meshed with, that was kind of like a change over time in the history of training. Like now you see CrossFit everywhere, but the type of training that I was promoting at that time was, I mean, it's kind of similar to CrossFit. But I was coming up with it years before CrossFit was popular. And so up until that point, it was, go and jog a couple miles and do some bench press. And that was what they would put in the magazine. But then I was giving them these unique bodyweight exercises, unique ways of training. And the editor of the magazine was on the leading edge of that stuff too. And so it just, like I said, the timing was really good. And then from there, it was just like, okay, unique stuff all the time. Busy guys, knowing the customer avatar. Whenever I teach my own marketing seminars, I talk about how I had this customer avatar for everything I wrote for Men's Health magazine and for all my early turbulence training stuff. And I go through this, really long customer avatar story. Mark was 34. He lived in Pennsylvania. He worked at a place like The Office. He had a crappy boss. It was like Scranton, Pennsylvania. He drove a beige minivan. He drove it home to this White House, not a picket fence, but a big lawn. And in the lawn, or on the lawn, were all these toys from his young boys. And then he'd go in the house and his boys would run up to him and they'd, jump on him. And then he'd go and grill and they'd eat dinner with the family. And then he'd put him to bed. And then he'd go down to his dungy basement and use his rusty dumbbells for a workout that he bought from me. And so that was the level of knowing my customer that we all need to know. And I used that avatar for probably 5 years in my early business because that was the Men's Health reader. And so now, then I knew so much about them. Now it's shifted to a couple of different avatars in the various businesses we have. But I really like that customer avatar mentality and making sure you know who the heck you're trying to communicate with, because it dictates what you say and, the words you use. I would not use the same words talking to Mark, the 34-year-old guy in my avatar, as I would talking to our new customers in our bodyweight program, who is going to be Joan, the 50-year-old woman. So it's totally different.
I love that. Now, how do you come up with those specifics? That was so detailed. That was probably the most detailed customer persona I've heard. How do you come up with those?
You dig deep, you roll your sleeves up and you muck it up with your customers. And so I was spending a lot of time on the Men's Health forum. They were paying me, a couple $100 a month to be on there and answering questions all the time. And, it's the same questions from 100 different guys, and they were pretty much all the same demographic. And I knew that, Men's Health it's popular around the world, but their biggest marketplaces in the Northeast and also California. And so I just, I knew the customer, and I was the customer, pretty much, because I had been reading the magazine for years. And you take a look at the advertisements and, you also interact with the clients. And so that was the way that allowed me to figure out who the heck I was serving.
That's great. So I want to talk a little bit about early to rise, and then we'll get to some email marketing and Facebook ads. What I loved is I looked at your SEMrush report for organic traffic, and according to SEMrush, which is of course estimated, it says you get about 20,000 plus organic visits per month, 0 paid search, and typically I've seen you could probably triple that number, and that's probably what you might really see in the analytics. So I'm really fascinated with how you're doing that, and I noticed that a lot of this site is built on content. So can you talk a little bit about where you're coming up with ideas for content, first of all?
Well, I have unlimited number of content. Today I was just thinking about an article called Marketing for Wives and Children 101. And it's not marketing for your wife or your children. It's about marketing how to get a wife or a child.
Right. And
I got this idea from Gary Halbert. Do you know Gary Halbert's story about how he got his wife?
I don't, actually.
Do you know who Gary Halbert is?
I actually don't. And
he's a direct response marketer. He's a very famous direct response marketer.
Mm-hmm.
And he once ran a full page ad in the LA Times with a personal ad. There's a full page in the LA Times describing exactly who he wanted to get married to. And that's how he found his wife. And he was a very, very eccentric copywriter. He would wear a hat that said "Clients suck" at his seminar. So he would be giving a seminar with a hat on that said "Clients suck," but that was like reverse psychology, and he ended up getting tons of clients. But then Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank had an article in Inc. magazine this month, and she adopted a kid 11 years ago. And she found her child by running direct response ads in penny saver mail. And
wow.
So she was basically going and trying to find someone who would give her their daughter. I mean, that's crazy. And she got this girl through that route. So you can use direct response marketing to find your wife or your child. And I'm going to write an article about that. And I can write articles about, I have so many articles that are half done on my computer that I could write an article every day for the rest of my life, because I never have a shortage of content, because I read a lot and I study a lot, and I know a lot of marketing. And so I could talk about it all day long and tell stories. But, the business Early to Rise has been around since 2000, and I bought it in 2011. And there are literally thousands of essays on it, because we have been putting out an article every day, 5 days a week since 2000. So, you do the math on that. It's thousands of articles. Most of them are written by a guy named Mark Ford, who wrote all his books under the pen name Michael Masterson, with his best-selling book being Ready, Fire, Aim. I bought that business from him in 2011. So that's what Early to Rise is all about, in terms of, the site was built to be this great hub of content that helps people with building their wealth, improving their health, and becoming a wiser person with living a full life.
So there's sort of, it looks like, two main business goals on this site. It's one is collecting email addresses, and two is you're selling some, I believe, courses and training programs. So how do you think about what content does for Early to Rise? Is it awareness? Is it traffic that will convert to email signups or even buying something? How do you think about where content fits?
Our content, our editorial, should almost blend in with advertisement if it's going to be one of those, on most days. So I like to think of Monday is going to be my one of my how-tos, or maybe my motivation article of the week. Then Tuesday, I really focus on some how-to stuff. Wednesday, we try and theme it around wealth building. And then as we get later on in the week, Thursday and Friday, we move on towards more of something related to a better family life, or something that tells a good story or reminds us of what really matters in life, like maybe something about gratitude. Mm-hmm. Now, we're going to put all that content on our site as well. And the marketing articles are going to bring in the leads that we want to sell our courses to. The rest of the stuff is really supporting our readers and, sharing with them, hey, here's how you live a great life. It's not necessarily the type of thing that's going to bring us our best customer when we put it on our site, because, we'll be getting a lot of people who have no interest in marketing reading about gratitude. But it's also something that we think is a very important foundation in everybody's life. So we have all of that, and hopefully that answers your question in terms of how we use our content to drive our sales.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for the listeners, because a lot of people do struggle with creating content that to them might feel like it goes a little outside of their funnel. And how that can play a role in eventually leading to business goals. So I think it's really valuable for the listeners to hear what other people are doing with content. One specific, I want to point out there's a few articles that bring in a large share of the traffic. There's one about fast metabolism.
It's a waste of space on our site. It does absolutely nothing. It brings in people that are useless to our business.
Okay, so that's an article that the traffic doesn't really do anything in terms of fulfilling your goals. It does
absolutely nothing. And I can't figure out a way to monetize it, because it's people who are going to that page because they can't eat enough to gain weight, and that's not our business at all.
Right.
We can sell people stuff to lose weight, but these people don't want to lose weight. So that was an article we wrote years ago, and it didn't have the intended result.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a few others that get a lot of traffic. The sad story of Mike Tyson, a spending fool, how the world's richest family went broke, and the truth about vending businesses. Do those three articles fit a little bit more aligned with the business goals?
A little bit, the Mike Tyson one and how the family went broke one, but not a whole lot. It's, we've always wondered how the heck can we turn these into anything, and at the end of the day we just go, you know what, it's not worth the effort and energy. Those things are just kind of random flukes that they get so much traffic.
Yeah, it's funny, I so happen to pick the four articles that don't necessarily achieve the goals and mention those in the interview, but I'm sure there's many others that
it's just the way it is.
Yeah. I'm sure there's many others that do tie into the business goals. So how do you think, there's some content on Early to Rise that you need to enter an email address or it's behind a wall. Is that correct?
No, not on that site. Everything is available. Well, you might have to, like, there might be a pop-up that comes for like first-time visitors, but there's no paywall on that site. That is.
Got it. Do you utilize gated content on any of your sites?
We have something called ETR University, which is all courses that people have to pay for. Yeah.
Great. And so that's gated because people have to pay for it as an actual product?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So that's really advanced video courses and step-by-step how-to make money. Some of the perfect day formula stuff is in there as well.
So here's an interesting question. There's a big discussion and debate in the SEO and content marketing worlds right now about gating content or not. Now, since you don't have any content gated, was that an option that ever came up? And if so, why did you choose to not gate any content?
It was never something that came up. It's always been the way that we've delivered the content. We believe in building a goodwill bank with people. And so when I've started other sites in addition, before I bought Early to Rise, for example, I started a website called Internet Independence. And for a year, I wrote content for free on that site, didn't sell anything. And people were just begging to buy from me. They would private message me, hey, when are you starting a mastermind group? When are you creating a product? And so I've always been a fan of delivering quite a bit of free content because, as I mentioned to you before, I am an unending source of content, and I have more and more higher levels of content to help people make money. And that's what's in our ETR University course. So I'm the kind of guy who is, I guess, Evan Pagan used push the free line, that sort of thing. I do lots of free content to build a relationship, to build the goodwill, build the email list. And when it's time to sell, I sell pretty aggressively when it's time to sell. And so when it is time to sell, we do sell. And we actually sell almost every day through our emails as well.
How much content or how many articles per week, per month are you personally writing and posting?
I'm doing about 6 on ETR. So I do every Monday, and then I might throw in a couple of additional ones that I try and focus the really best stuff on Monday. Then I might write something a little more gratitude focused on towards the end of 1 or 2 weeks. But that's what I'm doing. And then I still write a lot of stuff in the fitness side of the business because we have a very large email list there, and it's mostly from my voice, and it's so easy. I mean, I can crank out 3 articles in 30 minutes on fitness stuff because I've been talking about this for 20 plus years. Yes,
the benefits of actually being an expert and not just pretending to be one. I know some of the listeners sometimes might struggle with a process for creating content. Do you have a process that you like to adhere to? Is it as simple as just you have a collection of ideas and then you pick one, or do you use outlines or any particular tools? Well,
one of the things, just to go back to what I was talking about, how easy it is to write the fitness stuff, is the Early to Rise stuff is 1,000-word essays, and they need to be, well formulated, well thought out. The fitness stuff is just like, hey, here's a funny story about me and my dog and me traveling. And then, hey, here's a little workout you can do. See ya. And, buy this product. So, I mean, it's very casual. So going back to the Early to Rise, we have a formula, and people listening, if they're good writers and they want to, send in some content, by all means, they can do that. We're always looking for great writers and great pieces to add to our website. And we recommend this formula to them based on a focus on one big thing. And so our articles, I recommend people write them this way. You start off with a story, you introduce the lesson that you're going to teach them, you show an example of how this works, and then you wrap it all up with a bow, as I say at the end, where you summarize and you kind of tie back into the start. So, going back to that Barbara Kokorin article I was talking about before, I'm going to write an article about 1,000 words. It's going to be called Marketing for Wives and Children 101. And that is going to be, again, how to market, how to use direct response marketing. And you can actually use direct response marketing to get a wife or a child. So I'll use Barbara Kokorin's story. Then I'll use the Gary Halbert story about how he found his wife. Then I'll use how I've used direct response marketing in my life. And here's how you would go. And, what really tied all 3 of those stories together is the power of a customer avatar. And I would use that customer avatar story. And then I would sign off by saying, it's really important. This is to know exactly what you're looking for. It worked for Gary, it worked for Barbara, it worked for me, and it'll work for you too. And that'll be the essay. It teaches a really great lesson, but it only teaches one lesson. It's not a listicle. It's not like, here are 19 things you need to do to make a good headline, or 43 foods you can't eat today. I see all that crap all over the internet, and it's not quality stuff. Our stuff is high quality. It makes you think. It gives you a lesson, a takeaway that you can apply to your business to make money or live a better life, whatever the focus is on that day.
And thank you for not doing those listicles. I think I share my opinion about those. And I do actually have a couple content suggestions for you based off of keyword research. I don't do this on every show, so giving you a couple free tips here. And the listeners can pull some insights out of this too. But I know you talk about, and we're going to talk about in your book, you talk about getting up at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. And actually the keyword get up at 4 a.m. is something that you could create an entire piece of content around that, because you do mention it as an aside in some of your content, but there's no actual article that targets that, because people are looking for how to get up at 4 a.m. or like what's involved with that. And then there's also Longtail's waking up at 4 a.m. benefits and these kinds of things. So,
man, you're awesome.
Anything I can do to help. And then interestingly, on the other end of that, people search for go to bed at 8 p.m. or sleep earlier. And I know this is a component of what you're talking about in your book. However, I don't believe you have a single piece of content targeting that either. So you could kind of bookend that and do two pieces of content.
That's really great. And sorry to interrupt, but so in my book, mm-hmm. you may have read this since you're reading the book. It's the 10-3-2-1-0 formula chapter.
Yes.
It's this formula on how to sleep soundly, but I need to rewrite it the way that you have it. But that piece of content has gone viral compared to anything I've ever done. So Inc. magazine picked it up. Mm-hmm. They did an article about it, then Lifehacker, and then The Telegraph in the UK. And then from there, it's been featured on Australian TV. I've been interviewed on Russian TV, and there's been multiple articles from online digital newspapers in the UK. So it has sent us the most traffic of all the articles that I've written, but I can do a better version of using the better titles and just, go through the same information. But the reason why it went viral is because it's really easy to remember. It has a formula to it. And mostly, I think, is because it allowed people to say why it's not possible. I'm an idiot and a loser for doing it, for using this formula, and how it won't work for them. Because that's what all the articles were about, was how this formula will not work for me. And they just made excuses. So it's kind of funny, but just to tie in, I can use that content here because it is something that's shareable. And then with your ideas of having the content titled better, we can really get some traffic to this site. So this has been an awesome call. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually ties into a question I had a little bit later. I did notice that the 10-3-2-1-0 formula was your, number one hit in terms of content and whatnot. You have a lot of links from that. How important to you, or what was behind the naming of that formula? Because I feel like the name of it could have driven its success. I mean, it's kind of fun to say, it's memorable, it's certainly unique. So what went into the naming of that formula that maybe some of the listeners can pull an insight or two out of?
Yeah, so I think there's also a curiosity aspect of it. Wait a minute, what's this 10-3-2-1-0? And so it is actually the formula of having a better night's sleep, which is 10 hours before bed, you stop drinking caffeine. 3 hours before bed, you stop heavy meals and alcohol. 2 hours before bed, you stop doing any work. An hour before bed, you stop electronics, and then 0 is the number of times you hit snooze in the morning. And so those are all actually research based. And so I've been reading about this stuff for decades. And I just thought, hey, I'm gonna make a chapter on how to sleep really well. And, with all those numbers in there, and it was a nice countdown, I was able to put it together that it actually kind of just tied up nicely in a bow, as I would say. So that's how the name came about.
Yeah, that's really great. I love the name. It's I don't know. It's just fun saying it or thinking about it.
And it's also really easy, like I said, for people to totally disagree with it because, they're like, oh, I don't want to give up drinking wine an hour before bed. And that's like the content of most of the articles about these women that's why it's not going to work for me. And it's like, okay, I mean, going to argue with you, but if you want to have a great night's sleep, don't drink wine right before you go to bed. You know, that's the whole point of the article.
Yep. So I do want to jump into talking about the lessons from that book in just a moment. I want to circle back a little bit and just ask about some of these links, because a lot of the listeners are interested in SEO and links and whatnot.
Yeah.
I want to ask about some of these links that Early to Rise has acquired. I know we talked a little bit about Men's Health. Obviously, you write for them. I think you mentioned that led to some other publications. I see that you were in GQ, Maxim, and National Geographic. So,
well, GQ's funny because they actually just took a photo of me and had an artist draw it out. And so they basically ripped off one of my photos. So there's a photo of me half naked on the internet, which is like my $1 million photo. It's me shirtless and my dog is beside me. And one day my friend was reading GQ and he said, "Hey, your photo's in GQ." And I'm like, I've never obviously done any modeling. And so I bought the magazine. It was from April 2010. And one of their artists just went and it looks exactly like me. I'm holding a kettlebell over my head, just like I'm holding a kettlebell over my head in this strange photo. And so they ripped me off. So I never actually wrote anything for GQ, but I can say that I'm a GQ model.
That's funny. And what about National Geographic?
I did do work for them, like 2003 or 4. It was like just an article on interval training. So all these magazines, most of them I'm in multiple times, like Details and Maximo I was in multiple times, because one of the editors from Men's Health, he left Men's Health and went and worked for Details, and he had my contact. His Men's Fitness I did stuff for, Prevention, Oxygen I did a lot of stuff for. So we had all of those magazines linking back. Once I was in them, they would publish my stuff, and I would kind of say, "Hey, you mind putting a link in there back to the site?" And that helped.
And then I see you have one actually on 4hourworkweek.com, Tim Ferriss's site. It's from the 12 lessons learned while marketing the 4-hour body. It's among a big list of a whole bunch of links on that post. Do you know how that one came about, or were you aware of that link?
I'm not sure if I was aware of that link, but I knew Tim. Well, I still know Tim, obviously. But when Tim was launching that book, it was after 4-Hour Work Week came out. And Tim met up with a whole bunch of us fitness guys at an event in Austin, Texas. And we were all, helping Tim promote that book. And so we promoted the book through my email list. And I don't know what the link is. I don't know if it's in the comments on his site or if he linked back to me because he was thanking me. I've actually never investigated that one, but that's how that link would have came about. It would have been in relation to the fact that I helped him, promote that book. Makes sense.
Let's see. I have it right here. Early to... I forget what the anchor text is. It's in a group of links where he says, it's in a section, Tim's headings are funny. It says, 4, carpet bombing the internet, brief periods of intense noise making. So I guess he's talking about getting out there, and he mentions he was in bodybuilding, Huffington Post, New York Post. And then I think he mentions maybe something where you may have mentioned him on one of your sites. And so maybe I got him in Men's Health or something like that too. So he was doing classic book launch, and that's what he meant by carpet bombing. I'm sure it's just that unified front of all these guys who have influence in the fitness world. We're talking about the 4-hour body, in addition to him doing his promotions online and on TV. And so there's one other one, Tree Hugger. You have a link from them.
I don't even know what that is.
And then you're also in Inc.com. Someone by the name of Jessica Stillman is talking about the 10-3-2-1-0 formula.
Yes, she was the first person to write about it. I think she contacted me and got like a quote or two. And then immediately after that, it was on Lifehacker, which sent me a lot of traffic.
Yep.
And then it showed up on the Telegraph. And then another thing that sent me a whole lot of traffic from that was one of the articles, I think the Telegraph one, was featured in an app called Pocket. Have you ever heard of Pocket?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so it was, Pocket sends out this update to a lot of people, and with the top 10 articles of the week, and mine was like the third one. So that sent us like 20,000 page views in a day from that. So yeah, we didn't expect it. We were caught off guard by it, and therefore we didn't even turn it into a whole bunch of opt-ins. So I will say that early to rise is not optimized the best for opt-ins these days, because we've just been so deep in the fitness industry for the last couple of years because of some of our other success. And so now we're focused back on earlytorise.com. We're building out craigballantyne.com and really switching my business away from fitness and over to this productivity and personal development stuff, which is more of my interest these days.
Makes sense. So I want to get to the perfect day and the formula and the kit you have here. And if we have time, I'll circle back to the little email marketing and Facebook marketing. But this is really fascinating, and I want to tie in the context for the listeners. So for the listeners out there, I know if you've been especially listening to the show for now almost 50 episodes, we talk about SEO, we talk about digital marketing, a lot of inbound marketing channels. So you might be wondering, how does this perfect day stuff tie into marketing? Well, I think, and maybe Craig, you can agree or disagree, but I think there's two parallels here. One being your physical health and well-being, I think, really affects the input of your work success. So if you're feeling energized and excited and healthy and awake, you can get more done and be more effective, especially with knowledge-based work. And two, I think to kind of, and again, you can fill in the gaps here, but I think to kind of conquer your day in terms of having a process, a routine, a formula, that parallels with marketing success, because I've seen so much marketing success come from not only the ideas, of course the ideas need to be great, but executing those with consistency and with sort of a formula and repetitive plan behind them. And so those are the two parallels that I draw. So for the listeners listening, this all absolutely can feed back into your marketing success. But Craig, can you start by just explaining why perfect day? What's the opportunity around this is the idea for the product? Why not some other, name or type of product?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I took a long time to write the book and put it all together, and I've played around with a couple of different titles. I was going to call it Best Day Ever was another one. It ended up being Perfect Day Formula, and I'm happy with that because Turbulence Training was the stupidest name ever and makes no sense to anybody. I managed to make that work just by running my head through a wall for 12 years and not doing it the easy way, like my friend Mike Geary of Truth About Apps, who had a much clearer selling proposition. Yeah. But Perfect Day Formula is exactly what I want people to experience. Because I've experienced days where at 5 o'clock you go, holy cow, I had an amazing day today. I got so much done. I made big improvements in my business. I moved the needle, and I'm able to get home and spend time with my family. And I'm not going to be feeling like I have to work all night. And that day can be replicated over and over and over again. And that's what I've gone on to help people do. And so, some of my clients who have used this and some of my best friends who have used this are really high level marketers. Like Russell Brunson has, who most people should know, who runs ClickFunnels and all that great stuff. He did a podcast just talking about how my kit, my Perfect Day Formula, has given him an extra 2 hours a day of productivity. And I had never even talked to Russell before he did that podcast. Mm-hmm. Joe Polish gave him the kit. He went and used it and became more productive. My friend Bedros Keuilian, he used to have anxiety attacks like I did, and my anxiety attacks were the stimulus for writing the book in the first place. And our anxiety attacks came from being overwhelmed by work. So most people listening, I mean, if you're an SEO person, gosh, you could be doing 9 million things, working 36 hours a day and never be done. Yep. And that type of opportunity can bring great overwhelm and anxiety. And so I wrote this book to help people like you and your listeners to overcome that and focus on what really matters. Put structure in your day so you get a ton of work done, and so you can still go home and be present, with your sick wife and helping her out and all that great stuff. So that's why I built the system. And just going back to what you said about health and fitness, Richard Branson has a great quote that he says, the hour a day I spend in exercise gives me 4 extra hours of productivity. And if you're not going to listen to a billionaire like Richard Branson, then I don't know who you're going to listen to. But I mean, you have to take into account how important being healthy and fit is. And I learned that the hard way when I had my anxiety attacks because my health was being taken away from me. And I'll tell you what, the old cliche is true. When you're losing your health, you would give anything to have it back. all the money in the world just to feel normal and healthy again. And I was so relieved that I was able to get through that. And when I got through it, that's when I started putting together my systems that allowed me to have very productive days without being overwhelmed, without being anxious, and then showing as many people as I possibly could about how to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. And so I've got the kit here. It's a book, and then there's some pamphlets and like a gratitude journal, which looks like something that you can write in every single day. And then it looks like there's a little bit of a calendar-like thing here where it looks like you can set time blocks and stuff. So this is great. It's not just a book. It's a whole kit. And I imagine this kind of would help somebody be consistent with everything and actually apply it. I mean, that's when you get a book sometimes and you don't know how to apply what's in the book. And this is great because it gives that tool for application. Let's start with mornings. And we can't cover everything from what's in the book here, but I want to cover mornings. You get up at 4 a.m. every day. Is that correct?
I do indeed.
And so for myself, I'll be honest, and perhaps a lot of the listeners, that time sounds like an insane time to wake up. Why wake up at 4 a.m.? Let's start there.
Well, there's nobody else up at that time. So I like to say I live by extreme example. I certainly don't expect people to get up at 4 a.m. I thought it was crazy for a long time. I mean, it still is crazy. I mean, let's be honest, it's crazy to get up at 4 o'clock. But as an entrepreneur, I'm able to shift my schedule. And so all I've done, I still have the same 24 hours. I'm still up the same number of hours most people are. I've just shifted my schedule. And so, I mean, it's as radical as when you were in college and you got up at 11 o'clock every day and you heard about someone getting up at 7 a.m. and you were like, oh my gosh, how can you possibly get up at 7 a.m.? But what I did was I went through introspection on myself, and I realized back when I was getting up at 7:30 in the morning, which still seems early to some people, this is 2007, I realized I was waking up and feeling very anxious. Because I'm a morning person. I love the morning. I love getting a lot done in the morning. And so when I was getting up at 7:30, it was too late. It was already too late. So I started moving it back. And even when I got to 6 o'clock, I'm like, you know what? I could just get so much more work done because there's fewer distractions even earlier. And so I worked back. And now this is about as far as you can go without, not going to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening, which is pretty difficult when you have business dinners and stuff like that. So those are the hours I try and keep, and I don't deviate from the wake up time as much as I deviate from the dinner time or the go to bed time. I mean, I have a lot of travel. I have lots of work meetings and work dinners. And so I'm often up until 10 or 10:30, sometimes 11 o'clock. I try not to stay up any later than that. And I don't deviate too far from the wake up time. And then I just have a nap the next day and go to bed earlier the next night. And so that's what I recommend to most people is they find their time. I don't care if you go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and get up at 10. One of my best friends does that, and he runs a $100 million supplement company between the hours of 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. It works for him. It's not about the hour you get up. It's about what you do with the hours that you are up. And so you can go to bed and get up at the same time. You should go to bed and get up at the same time every day because that'll give you all day energy. But I don't care what the hours are that you choose. So that's my long rant about what time I get up and what time other people get up. But the number one thing that I did this for was for my productivity. And I'm a weak-willed individual, just like most people. And so if I can get up at 4 a.m., I have fewer distractions from, there's no emails coming in from people. My friends aren't, texting me. I'm the only person up, and I can get a ton of work done before the rest of the world even gets up. And that way I'm ahead of the game. And so when 9 o'clock comes around, I don't feel that bad if I actually answer an email.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's an alternative narrative that's out there a lot. And one particular marketer, I'm sure everyone will know who I'm talking about, has practically branded himself around this idea of hustle and about not sleeping as much. Where do you see that fitting in? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Should somebody be always aiming for 8 hours a night? Is there room to sleep?
I do disagree with this never sleep thing. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you're not going to be the richest person in the world. You're not. You're just never going to be richer than Bill Gates. So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between how much money you have to have and how much you're willing to sacrifice for it? Are you going out there and making a positive impact on the world? Are you doing good things? Are you building a good family? Are you giving your family time that they deserve? Are your kids going to grow up in a good way? If your answer is yes, and you're doing a good job, you don't have to be guilted into hustling more and sacrificing stuff. I've, put myself in the hospital twice because I've worked so hard and had the anxiety attacks. I literally twice walked into the emergency room in Toronto, Ontario, and said I was having a heart attack at the age of 30. Wow. That's not a good thing to do. That's not a good thing to put yourself through. And there's always going to be some people that can get away with, murder on their bodies.
Yeah.
There's just going to be some people that can. But you're probably not one of them. You're probably not one of these people who can sleep 4 hours a night, perform really well, and, somehow not get divorced by your wife. So listen, and this is actually part of my book, the whole vision thing, is figuring out what the heck you really want. And then you go, okay, this is what I really want. And I don't care. I'm not going to be influenced by the externals of the world. I'm not going to try and keep up with the Joneses. I'm going to hustle what I consider is hustle. I'm going to make the impact that I want to make. And you know what? I'm still going to coach my son's baseball team and stop work at 4 o'clock. And you can do that. You can have the exact life you want. Just make sure that you're choosing exactly what you want and not being peer pressured into people. And, that's a problem with society right now, is comparing themselves to others. It drives us into depression and anxiety. And that's why we have more depression and anxiety than ever before, despite being, the most affluent country in the world here in America, which I'm actually Canadian, but my business is in America. And so, I see it all the time, and we're doing it to ourselves because we're listening to that type of message. Now, I'm not against hustle, obviously. I like people working hard. But you have to know where to draw the line in everything in life, whether it's how many slices of pizza you're going to have or how many hours you're going to work a day.
Let's talk a little bit about beating procrastination. This is a chapter in the book. And personally, this is something that I and probably many people have struggled with. I'm sure we can all relate to those days where you show up, you get to the office, you open the laptop, you get set up, you intend to do great things, and then 3 hours later, you're deep in some YouTube, funnel. You don't even know how you got to watching the cat videos that you're on. And then you feel bad, and then it leads to this kind of depression and feeling bad about yourself. So what are some ways that you could tell the listeners to kind of help beat procrastination?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we all deal with it. And I actually call procrastination our stupid human trick. And because, here's the greatest example. Like, hey, guess what day Christmas is next year? December 25th. Yeah, guess what day it was last year? December 25th. Guess what day you're going to the mall? December 24th. Yeah, why? Because you procrastinate to the last minute. But here's the power of that, is the deadline. Because you can't show up on December 26th with a present. Your wife, your girlfriend, she ain't going to be happy if everybody else got a present on Christmas Day, but she didn't because you missed the deadline. And so with the procrastination, we have to do a couple of things. We have to plan to beat it, and we have to use a deadline to inspire us to take action. So we talked about Tim Ferriss before, and one of my favorite lessons from the 4-hour work week is this thing that he introduced me to that I never heard before, which is Parkinson's law. Yep. And Parkinson's law states that the task will expand to fill the time allotted for it. And the greatest example of that is college, right? College, we have our essay. Our essay is due on March 21st. Okay, I'll do it March 29th at 10 p.m. or March 20th at 10 p.m., right? But what if the professor said March 14th, you would have got it done on March 13th at 10 p.m.
Yeah, it's this artificial construct almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, all right. So we want to do something tomorrow morning. Well, if we want to do something, tomorrow morning, or, if you're listening to this at 9 o'clock in the morning and you want to do something today, you actually should have started last night, outlining whatever you were doing, putting together the steps in place. You go back to a book by Chip and Dan Heath. It's not Made to Stick. It's their other one, Switch, I think is the name of it. Yeah, so they talk about clearing the path. They're talking about riding an elephant in the book. That's their analogy. And so you clear the path. So if you want to wake up and exercise tomorrow morning, you go to bed in your gym clothes, like clean gym clothes, of course, or you put the gym clothes beside the bed so that you wake up and the path is very clear for you to put on the gym clothes and for you to exercise. And that's why actually one of my programs sold so well, because our program, the Home Workout Revolution, was no equipment, bodyweight exercises you can do at home. And so I cleared the path and made it really easy for people to overcome all the excuses. And so if you want to write a book, here's what you do. You write the outline of the chapter you're going to write. the night before. And then you wake up the next morning, you open the Word document, and it's not this big white screen with nothing on it. And you go, I'll go check out a cat video on YouTube. You got that path cleared. And so make it easier for you to do whatever it is that you don't want to do. And then follow Brian Tracy's advice and eat that frog. And the advice in that book is do the hardest thing on your to-do list, the thing you don't want to do it first. Don't do anything else before you do it. And the best time to do it is first thing in the morning, because that's when we're loaded up with willpower.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts around, and maybe this is just a matter of developing habits and getting in a routine, but that moment when, and maybe other people experience this, when you're actually sitting there and it's almost like you're battling in your head, do the work or watch YouTube videos, or do the work or go get a snack. Do you have any advice for that actual moment when you're trying to battle with yourself, like do A or B? Is that a matter of that, utilizing that prep beforehand? Is there anything we can do in that moment to try to break out of that?
Yeah, you need a trigger. So I've dealt with this forever. So have you ever heard Eben Pagan use the phrase OCD loop?
I have not, but I clearly know what that means. It sounds like.
Right. So here was my OCD loop back in 2007. ClickBank stats, ESPN, my email, PayPal stats, and then loop it back to the top, baby. And let's keep running through this every 30 minutes for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's the OCD loop that a lot of people get into. They're checking 9 things in a row and then they go back to the start. And with social media now, you can go through 19 different social media accounts and loop that all day.
Yeah.
So here's what I realized. I needed something to snap me out of it. I needed a trigger. And so as I was going through it, I'd be like, no, don't go to the next one. And what I realized was, as long as I could just open a Word document and start writing, get a couple of words out, all of a sudden I'd break that loop. So you have to come up with something that would break the loop. So I don't know what it's going to be for everybody. If it's going to be a snack, maybe you put a mirror on your fridge, because this is an actual technique that does work to stop people from snacking, is to put a mirror on your fridge, a little, cosmetic mirror, so that when you go to the fridge, you have to look at yourself before you open it. And it's really true. Clever. It's actually because I do all this research on weight loss stuff too. So I have all these hacks and stuff in my mind, but you just want to basically build a fence around yourself that protects you from your bad habits. And so you need to identify 2 triggers. One, what triggers you to go off on the detour of the bad habit, and what can trigger you to snap out of the bad habit. So you want to avoid the one trigger and you want to implement the other trigger that gets you back on track. So it might just take a little introspection, figuring yourself out, like, how can I fix this problem? But there are solutions out there for everything. And the more solutions you have to overcome the bad habits and implement the good ones, the better off you're going to be. Eventually, you're going to make things into a good habit and you'll succeed.
Yes.
And, I've overcome plenty of bad habits in my life. I've stopped swearing in 6 days, by using my systems in the book and by using these triggers and punishments and all these sorts of things. So you can overcome almost anything with planning and preparation and these little trigger tricks.
It's very interesting. I noticed, reverse engineering my own psychology, that I believe what I'm looking for when I'm doing that is social interaction, because I'm very much an extrovert, get energy from being around people. So I was at the Inbound HubSpot conference last week for 2 days, completely filled me up, right? I mean, I had less time to work, but I got more done last week because I was around people a lot. And then this week came, and then that high kind of drops, and then I'm sitting there craving that social interaction. So maybe people just need to reverse engineer a little bit what's giving them their energy. I think
I would say, that's a really great point. Sorry to interrupt there, Dan. I always tell people that if I had one superhuman power, it is the superhuman power of what I call introspection, or what everybody would call introspection, which is the ability to look at your actions, identify where you're going right and where you're going wrong, and then to admit to myself that the bad ones need to stop. And so if someone knew me 10 years ago and hadn't met and seen me in 10 years and then hung around me now, they would say, wow, you are a completely different person. And, even my friends that have known me for a long time say the same thing, which is in a way makes me feel bad because I realize how much of not a great person I was 10 years ago. But I've always been on this constant and never ending improvement journey. And it all starts with that introspection, which people just need to do. Self-reflection. Look at how you spent your day. Look at how, you interacted with people. When did you raise your voice? Did you really need to yell at your kid for doing that? Did you hold the door open for somebody? Why did you do that? And why didn't you do the other thing? And then start putting the systems into place to do more of what is right and what works and do less of what is wrong and what doesn't work. And that's just how you improve your life. Slowly but surely, and those things compound over time and turn you into a very successful person.
That is a perfect segue into my last question about the perfect day formula to tie that up. You talk about concentrating on what counts, and I imagine you're referring to kind of all of life. I'm wondering, how can somebody figure out what counts and then maybe give a little insight about how we could apply this to business or even marketing?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And every time not every time, but most of the times I would speak at an event, someone would come up to me after and say, this is all really great, but how do I know what matters? And I was actually kind of at a loss for words for a while because I'm like, how do you not know what matters? And then I heard it enough that I realized that people do struggle with figuring out, with all the opportunity in life, what does really matter. And then a friend of mine, a pastor named Luciano Del Monte, told me this story this analogy that there are 4 seasons of life and we all are in a different season of life and we can, bounce in and out of them. But the seasons of life are health, wealth, family, or personal enrichment. So someone who is in a season of health, that's what they should focus on. And a person who would be in a season of health might be someone who is 55 years old. They spent the last 25 years building up, their family and their career. Financially, they're okay. The kids are out of the house. They're off to school. Relationship with the spouse is good, but they're pre-diabetic. Well, you know what? They better concentrate on what counts, which is their health. So they're going to get up early in the morning and focus on exercise or nutrition. And that's going to be like the thing that's going to, decide every activity over the course of the day. Every decision is going to be based around improving their health. Now, there might be a young person who's 29 years old. They're going to be in a season of wealth building because they just got engaged. They want to build, have a house on a nice street in their town. They need to go and make some money and build up a nest egg. So they're going to be in a season of wealth building. And that's going to be their overriding priority and dictate all the decisions they make. And then in a season of family, you just had a young kid, the kid's 2 months old, that is going to be dictating every decision you make because you are in charge of that child. Or maybe you're taking care of an aging parent. And you have to be you're the only person that can, take them to the doctor and do all this stuff. And maybe you have to do some extra care for them. So you're in a season of family, and that's going to get in the way a little bit of your health and your wealth building. But this is a sacrifice you have to make right now. And then there's finally the season of personal enrichment, which is actually where you are in charity and community and stuff like that. So my mother is in a season of personal enrichment. She's, kids are out of the house, financially is okay, health is okay, and she is just focused on volunteering, giving back, and that sort of thing. So those are the 4 seasons of life. You figure out which one you're in. That helps you identify your number one priority, and that's the number one thing that you focus on first thing in the morning for at least 15 minutes, and that is something that I teach everybody to focus on their number one priority for at least 15 minutes first thing in the morning, because that's how you have a victory that the world can't take away from you, no matter how crazy the rest of it gets. And that's how you have progress. That's how you move ahead and keep the momentum going. So hopefully that helped.
It does. And we all know how crazy the world seems to be getting, especially in the last week down here in the States. And tying that to business, and I know Tony Robbins has mentioned the seasons of life, but also seasons of business. So we could probably take that same mindset that an early business has different needs than, a business 5 years old versus 20 years old, right? So we can maybe apply that to business as well.
Well, definitely to different revenue levels, So, I mean, that's a really cool way of asking that question. Nobody's ever said that to me before, but I think I can kind of come up with some ideas. And this goes back to my mentor, Mark Ford, who wrote Ready, Fire, Aim under the pen name Michael Masterson. It's a very popular business book. In fact, it's the #1 business book I recommend to everybody, Ready, Fire, Aim.
Yep.
And he talks about the 4 stages of business: 0 to 1 million, 1 million to 10 million, 10 million to 50 million, and 50 million and above. And he's built businesses in all those levels. And you're right that each one of those phases has different requirements. So in 0 to 1 million, it's all about selling. That's all you're thinking about. You're pretty much a solo entrepreneur, and all you should be spending 80% of your time selling, not on social media, not on this, that, and the other thing, but just selling and figuring out how to make revenue. Mm-hmm. And then from 1 million to 10 million, now you're kind of getting into a bit of team building, right? Because before you were just a one-off show, but if you're up to $5 million, you got to have web people, you got to have copy people, you got to have this, that, and the other thing. And so now you're in a completely different entrepreneur. You went from maker to manager. And then after that, there's going to be a different season when you go from 10 million to 50 when you're scaling up. And so now you have to be in a completely different mode. And then after that, you're practically a corporate style company at 50 million plus. So those are the seasons of business that you're in. But most people listening are probably in those first 2 stages, 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. And it's really about selling the heck out of things in the first stage, in the first season of life, and then building a great team around you in the second season.
Yeah, I've got the book pulled up here. I definitely want to I've heard the book many times. I want to get it and read it and check it out. I'll put it in the show notes. So it looks like we're headed towards the end here. Do you want to tell the listeners where they can find you online? Any URLs you want to give them? Now's your chance to kind of plug all that stuff.
Yeah, I would love for people just to grab a free copy of the book. It's a free plus shipping offer at freeperfectdaybook.com. And, they can go through the book, and they're getting a ton out of the book. It's a very short little book. You probably read it in about 90 minutes to 2 hours. Yeah. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you can get all the cool stuff that Dan has in the kit. I have a little video explaining everything there at perfectdayformula.com. So I explain the kit as having me sitting down at your kitchen table and practically coaching you through it, because there's a whole bunch of questions in the worksheets that help you build your rules for your life, your vision for your life, and use the 5 pillars of success.
Yeah, that's great. And any social profiles, or if people want to follow you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is on twitter.com/Craig Ballantyne. And then we have Facebook pages for Turbulence Training. We have like 285,000 fans there, and Early to Rise has about 40,000 fans. And then, if people want to connect even more, like about SEO or copywriting, they can connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Great. So definitely go check out Craig and all the stuff online, the Perfect Day Formula. Craig, it's been great having you on the show. Really fascinating interview. Enjoyed that a lot. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Greg, for joining us. Craig, sorry, did I say Greg? Thanks, Craig.
That's all right. Greg the Hammer Ballantyne, right? That's what people used to call me because they couldn't get my name of Craig Ballantyne.
What did they call you?
Greg the Hammer Ballantyne. I was an old wrestler from the 80s.
Oh, right. Now, that's a memory way deep in my brain.
Right.
Well, great. Thank you, Craig, for joining us, and we'll see everyone next time. Thank you.